The envelope hit the table between my hands like a thrown knife. "That's yours," Preston said. "Take it and get out of my father's law office." I didn't move. 43 years of silence had just been flipped across a mahogany table at me by a man I had met 11 minutes ago, and my half-brother was already smiling. The small, careful smile of someone who had been rehearsing this moment for weeks. Bennett Ror's associate, a young attorney named Halstead, was frozen in his chair. He was maybe 32. He looked like a man who had walked into a board meeting and found a knife fight. Preston, Garrett put a hand on his arm. 48, corporate partner at a Pittsburgh firm, the smarter of the two brothers and the more dangerous for it. "Let him read it first. Let him see." Preston laughed. It was not a real laugh. It was the laugh men use when they are telling you, in front of witnesses, that you do not matter. "Fine. Open it, Dale. Let's all see what you got." $27 million split between them. Mansions, a yacht in Annapolis, a Porsche collection, stock portfolios, and a manufacturing company my father had spent 50 years building out of a welding shop in McKees Rocks. I had an envelope. "I'll open it when I'm ready." Preston's smile cracked for half a second. That was the tell. "That's not how this works. The will reading ended when you slid that across the table, Preston." I stood up. "Anything else? Send it through, Mr. Halstead." I picked up the envelope, walked out, 17 floors down, into a parking garage in downtown Pittsburgh in a borrowed charcoal suit my business partner Mike Petrosky had handed me that morning with the words, "Don't get anything on it and don't sweat through it, you cheap bastard." I sat in my F250 for 10 minutes staring at my name written in fading ink on yellowed paper, and I understood two things with complete clarity. The first was that my half-brothers had been planning this moment for weeks. The second was that I had walked into something much larger than a will reading, and Preston had just told me, with a laugh and a smile and an envelope thrown across a table, that he was going to make me disappear. I started the truck. 20 seconds later, 2 black SUVs pulled out of a parking space on the opposite side of the garage. They followed me onto Liberty Avenue. They followed me onto the Fort Pitt Bridge. They were still following me when I crossed the Ohio border. I was 43 years old. I had been underestimated my entire life, and my own blood had just declared me a problem. My name is Dale Kovac. I own a 2-man HVAC company in Youngstown, Ohio. My best friend Mike and I work out of a rented garage on Poland Avenue. Last year, we grossed $182,000. I took home $85,000, supported my 13-year-old daughter Audrey, drove an F250 with 140,000 miles on it, and lived in a 3-bedroom ranch on Meadowbrook Lane that still needed a new roof. That was my life. 2 weeks before the will reading, a Pittsburgh estate attorney named Bennett Ror had left a message on my shop's voicemail. "Mr. Kovac, I am contacting you regarding the estate of Richmond Hollister. You are named in the will. The reading will occur on February 26th at 10 a.m. I had not known Richmond Hollister's name before that voicemail. My mother had known it for 43 years. She had never said it out loud. I called her the day the voicemail came in. I drove to her bungalow on Vestal Road. I played the message for her on speakerphone in her kitchen, and I watched my mother, 71 years old, 5'4", the woman who broke a man's nose at a teachers' union meeting in 1998 for grabbing her elbow, sit down very slowly in her kitchen chair and put both hands flat on the table. "Mom, I need a minute." I waited. "Dale," she finally said, "that man was your biological father. He is dead now, which means the only thing that kept him from destroying our lives for 4 decades has just been removed. If he named you in his will, there is a reason. And whatever that reason is, his other sons are not going to be happy about it." "How do you know he had other sons?" "Because I was the second woman he lied to, and women like me always know there are more." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" She looked at me across the kitchen table. Her eyes were dry, but her jaw was working the way it used to work when she was trying not to cry in front of her students. "Because I spent 43 years hoping he would die quietly and leave us alone. Every day I woke up and he was still breathing. I knew he was still a danger. Now he's dead. And Dale, I'm telling you this once, whatever is waiting for you in Pittsburgh, you go there ready. Don't go there curious. Mom, I'm not afraid of a dead man. You should be afraid of his sons." 2 weeks later, I walked into that law office. 2 weeks later, Preston threw an envelope across a table. 2 weeks later, I drove out of Pittsburgh with 2 black SUVs in my rearview mirror, and I understood that my mother had been right about something my mother had been wrong about only twice in 43 years. I didn't go home. I didn't open the envelope. I drove past my street, parked at the Walgreens on Elm, walked 2 blocks over to Mike Petrosky's house and knocked on his kitchen door at 7:42 p.m. Mike opened it holding a beer and a spatula. "Dale, what the hell?" "I'm being followed." He stared at me for 2 full seconds. "Come in." Mike's kitchen was yellow. His wife Denise was at the stove. His youngest son was at the table doing math homework. It was a Tuesday evening in February in a middle-class house in Ohio, and it was the safest place I could think of. Denise put a plate in front of me without being asked. I ate. Mike waited. When the plate was empty, I slid the envelope across the table. Will reading was today. My half-brothers got $27 million split between them. I got this. And when I left, they had people follow me all the way into Ohio. Mike picked up the envelope, held it up to the light, shook it gently. Something metal in there, small, key maybe. "Yeah?" "You haven't opened it." "Not yet." "Dale, I've known you since we were 8, and all that time I have never seen you scared." "I'm not scared." "Bullshit." I looked at him. "Okay, I'm scared." Mike set the envelope down. "My dad," I said, "spent 43 years pretending I didn't exist. Now he's dead, and his sons hired surveillance on me within an hour of the will reading. That doesn't happen because someone got left a watch. That happens because I was left something that threatens them. Something they've been waiting for. Something they've been preparing for." Mike took a long swallow of his beer. "So, Dale, don't open that envelope in your house. Don't open it anywhere they might have eyes. Come to the shop tomorrow at 6 a.m. before anyone else is on the road. We'll open it together." "Okay. And one more thing. You call your mom tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight. I already talked to her 2 weeks ago. She told me everything she knew." Mike looked at me for a long moment. "Dale, you just told me they had 2 cars tail you for 140 miles. Whatever your mother told you 2 weeks ago, it isn't everything she knows. Women who spent 43 years being careful don't run out of secrets in one conversation. Call her tonight. Go see her. Ask her what she didn't tell you." My mother was waiting at her door at 9:40 p.m., which meant Mike had called her before I'd even left his kitchen, which meant there was something she'd been holding back. Her kitchen smelled like hazelnut coffee and the lemon cleaner she'd used since 1985. She had a manila folder on the table in front of her this time. Thick, old, held together with a rubber band. "Sit." I sat. "Dale, I am going to tell you something I have not told another human being in 41 years. I am telling you because you are in danger and because you need every piece of information I have. I am telling you once. I will not tell you again. Mom." Frank knew him. I stared at her. "Frank, your stepfather, the man who raised you. He knew Richmond Hollister before either of us ever met Richmond. They worked together in 1976. I sat back in the chair. "What?" "Richmond Hollister started Hollister Industrial with his father in 1974, after he got married. By 1976, they were growing fast, and they needed electrical work done on the new fabrication shop. The union sent 3 apprentices. One of them was Frank Kovac, 28 years old, just off a 2-year journeyman run in the Lordstown plant. Mom, let me finish." I shut up. Frank worked on that shop for 8 months. He and Richmond became, not friends, but close. Richmond respected him. Said Frank had the best hands he'd ever seen. Frank came home with stories about Richmond, about the kind of man he was, the kind of marriage he was in, the kind of father-in-law he was being crushed by. Frank told me, in 1984 when we met, that Richmond Hollister was the most trapped man he had ever known. He told me Richmond was going to do something terrible someday because men who get that trapped always do. Mom, Frank knew Richmond existed before you did? Frank knew Richmond existed before you did, before I met Richmond, before you were born. But Frank never, when I told Frank, in 1984, who had gotten me pregnant, Frank went silent for about an hour. Then he said, "Eleanor, I worked for that man. He was always going to do this to someone. It just happened to be you." Mom, there's more. I waited. Frank stayed in touch with Richmond. Every muscle in my back locked up. Not openly, she said. Never. Frank would have sooner cut off his own hand than told Richmond where we lived. But in 1988, when you were 6 years old, Richmond found us. He tracked me to Youngstown. He came to a PTA meeting at East Elementary one night and waited in the parking lot. He walked up to Frank at Frank's truck, and he said, and Frank told me this later, word for word, he said, "I am not here to take them. I am here because I think I am going to die soon, and I need someone to watch out for my son when I am gone, and you are the only man I have ever met who could do it." I could not breathe. And Frank said yes. I still could not breathe. For the next 30 years until Frank died in 2019, your stepfather had a quiet agreement with your biological father. Frank was your guardian in every way that mattered in real life. But if anything happened to us, or if Richmond ever saw a threat coming that we couldn't see, Richmond had a way to reach Frank. A P.O. box in Poland, Ohio. 2 or 3 letters a year. Frank burned every one of them after reading. I found him burning one in the sink in 2015, and that was when he finally told me. "Mom, are you saying Frank, my Frank, was in contact with—" "I am saying your stepfather was a better man than either of us deserved. I am saying he spent 30 years protecting you from a family you didn't know about. I am saying Richmond Hollister was a coward, but he was a coward who chose the one honorable thing in his life, and the thing he chose was trusting Frank Kovac. Why are you telling me this now?" My mother reached into the manila folder. She pulled out a single envelope. My name was on the front, in Frank's handwriting. "Because Frank left you a letter, Dale. He gave it to me in 2017 and told me to give it to you only if Richmond died and trouble came for you. I've had it for 9 years. Tonight is the first night I've ever thought about handing it over." I took the envelope. My hands were shaking. "Read it in the morning," she said. "Not tonight. Tonight you need to sleep. Tomorrow you need to open Richmond's envelope at Mike's shop. Then you go somewhere quiet and you open Frank's. In that order. Frank would have wanted it that way. He always said you should understand the problem before you understand the solution." I stayed at my mother's house that night. I did not sleep. I held Frank's envelope in my hands for 6 hours and I did not open it, because my stepfather had asked me to understand the problem first, and I was going to honor that. At 5:30 a.m., I got in the truck. At 6 a.m., I was at the shop on Poland Avenue. Mike was already there. Richmond's envelope contained a single sheet of paper, torn from a leather notebook. 9 digits written in the same old-fashioned handwriting as the name on the outside. A small brass key stamped with the number 407, and one line written beneath the digits, Bennett Ror. "He is the 3rd person in Pittsburgh who knows you exist. Call him before they find you." Mike looked at the paper, then at me, then at the key. "What do you want to do?" "I want to call Bennett." I dialed. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Mr. Kovac, I was hoping you'd call by this morning. You know who I am?" "I have known who you are since November 14th, 1983. I drafted your father's trust that afternoon. Your father did not trust his wife. He did not trust his attorney of record. He trusted me, and he trusted a forensic accountant named Louisa Trenholm, and he trusted one other man, whose identity I will tell you when I see you in person. Bennett, my half-brothers had me followed out of Pittsburgh yesterday. I am aware. Louisa called me at 11 p.m. She has been monitoring Preston's private security firm for 6 months on your father's instruction. 3 operatives were dispatched at 2:47 p.m. yesterday. All 3 were withdrawn at 9:33 p.m. after you entered your mother's residence. They are currently holding outside your mother's house, waiting for you to emerge." Mike leaned toward the phone. "They're at his mother's right now?" "Yes." I stood up from the chair. "Bennett, if they followed me back to my mother's last night, they did not approach. Preston does not want operatives confronting a 71-year-old widow on her own street. He is waiting for you, Mr. Kovac. He expects you to return to your mother's home sometime today. He expects to intercept you there. What do? You do not go back to your mother's house, not today. You come to Pittsburgh, my office, 2 p.m. You will be met by Louisa Trenholm. We will explain what your father built, and you will decide how much of it to use." I hung up. I turned to Mike. "They're outside my mother's house." "Okay." "My mother's inside." Mike picked up his truck keys. "Then let's go get her." I want to tell you what happened at 7:14 a.m. on February 27, 2025, on Vestal Road in Youngstown, Ohio, because it was the moment my life divided into before and after. It was the moment I stopped being a man who handled HVAC repairs in the Mahoning Valley and became a man who handled something else. Mike drove. I rode shotgun. My mother was on the phone, already dressed, already packed, already expecting us. "Mom, stay inside. We'll pull into your driveway. You come straight out. Don't stop, don't look around, just get in the truck." "Okay." "Mom?" "Dale, I'm 71. I'm not scared of men in black cars. I'm Eleanor Vance Kovac. I will walk out of my own front door at my own pace." "Mom?" "Fine, I'll hurry." Mike turned onto Vestal Road. The black SUV was parked 4 houses down from my mother's bungalow. One man inside, driver's seat, earpiece visible, phone in his hand. He was reading something on the screen. He did not look up when we passed. Mike pulled into my mother's driveway. My mother came out of the front door carrying a small suitcase and a cast-iron skillet. "Mom, what is the skillet for?" It was my mother's. If I'm leaving my house for an undetermined number of days, the skillet comes with me. "Get in the truck." She got in the truck. Mike reversed out of the driveway. The black SUV started its engine. Mike drove slowly to the end of Vestal Road, turned right onto Belmont Avenue. The SUV pulled out behind us, followed at a distance of about 200 feet. "Mike, I see him." "What do you want to do?" "I want to drop your mother at my house. Then I want to lose him. Then we go to Pittsburgh." "Okay." Mike drove to his house. Denise was waiting. My mother got out with her suitcase and her skillet and hugged me once, hard, and said, "Go end this." We pulled out again. The SUV was still there. Mike drove south on Market Street, then east on 224, then onto I-680. The SUV stayed with us. After 12 miles, Mike said, "Dale, this guy's not good at this." "No?" "He's a private operator, probably ex-military. He knows surveillance, but he doesn't know the Mahoning Valley. Watch." Mike took an exit at Canfield, drove 2 miles on back roads, took a dirt turnoff into a strip of old industrial land I had not seen in 20 years, an abandoned scrapyard where Mike and I had ridden dirt bikes as teenagers. Mike drove through a gap in a chain-link fence that should not have been there. Came out on the far side through a service road that connected to a county highway. The SUV was gone. Where did he go? He's still circling the scrapyard. He didn't see the service road. He'll figure it out in about 10 minutes. We'll be 40 miles east by then. I looked at Mike. "How do you know this route?" "Dale, I grew up 3 blocks from you. I rode a dirt bike through that scrapyard every Saturday from ages 11 to 15. You think a guy from Fairfax County, Virginia knows this land better than I do? Rich people always think money buys local knowledge. It doesn't." We drove east. I opened Frank's envelope and the passenger seat at 9:07 a.m. on Route 224, approaching the Pennsylvania border, with the morning sun coming up over the cornfields. Frank's letter was 2 pages long. It was written in the handwriting of a man who had worked with his hands for 40 years and who had never been comfortable with a pen. The letters were careful, blocky, slow. "Dale, if Eleanor has given you this letter, then Richmond Hollister is dead and his sons have come for you. I'm sorry I'm not there to handle this with you. I expected to be. I told myself I would live long enough to see this through, but the cancer had other ideas, and so here we are. First thing, Richmond Hollister was a coward, but he was not a bad man. He was a trapped man. I worked for him in 1976. I knew him before your mother knew him. He was drowning in a marriage that wasn't his choice, and a company that was built on another man's leverage, and when he met your mother, he did the only thing a drowning man does. He reached for her. I don't forgive him for what he did to her, but I understand why. Second thing, in 1988, Richmond found us. He came to my work truck after a PTA meeting, and he made me an offer. He said he was going to die young. His father had died at 53, his grandfather at 47, and he was right about that, even if he lasted longer than he expected. He said his oldest son, Preston, was already a cruel boy at 15 years old, and he was going to grow into a cruel man. He said, when he was gone, Preston was going to come for you, and he asked me to be your line of defense. I said yes because I loved you, and because your mother loved me, and because I had worked for Richmond and knew what he said was true. I said yes because every man should have somebody watching his back, and you had nobody watching yours. For 30 years, I was in quiet contact with your real father. 2 or 3 letters a year. He told me what Preston was doing. He told me when Preston started having you watched. He told me when the codicil to his will was signed in 2019, and what it said. He told me what to do if he died and you were in danger. Here is what he wanted me to tell you when the time came. Dale, 49% of Hollister Industrial Fabrication's voting shares are yours. They transfer to you the moment Bennett Ror files the codicil. You will be the single largest voting shareholder in a company worth approximately $74 million. You can remove Preston. You can sell the company. You can do whatever you decide is right. It is yours. But here is the part Richmond did not tell Bennett. The part he only told me. There is a safe deposit box at First National Community Bank in Youngstown. Box 407. The key is in Richmond's envelope. Inside that box is a flash drive. On that flash drive is every piece of correspondence Preston has sent to private investigators about you and your daughter Audrey going back to 2015. Richmond intercepted every email, every report, every photograph. He did it quietly, through a man he trusted at Preston's security firm. He was building the case for you. The flash drive also contains something else. A recording. In 2023, Preston sat down with his financial advisor and discussed, explicitly and on tape, his intent to kill you by making sure you never survived to claim your inheritance. He used the word kill. The recording is clear. Richmond made sure it was recorded. Richmond had the man who made the recording paid for life. Preston is not just an embezzler, Dale. He is a man who has considered murder and said it out loud. Your father knew it. Your father made sure there was proof. Use it. Use all of it. You are not your father's son in the ways that matter. You are not Richmond Hollister. You are not a Hollister at all. Your name is Kovac. I gave you that name because I earned the right to give it to you, and because Kovac is a name that has been carried by working men for longer than Hollister has existed. Now, go carry it. Love, Pop. I sat in the passenger seat of Mike's truck for a full minute without speaking. Mike drove. Finally, Dale, what's in the letter? I told him. Mike drove another 2 miles without speaking. Then he said quietly, Dale, Frank Kovac was the best man either of us ever knew. I know. He just handed you a nuclear weapon from beyond the grave. I know. What are you going to do with it? I looked at Frank's letter, at his careful, blocky handwriting, at the signature Pop at the bottom, in the same hand that had signed every birthday card I had received for 35 years. I'm going to use it, Mike. I'm going to use all of it. We arrived at First National Community Bank in Youngstown at 11:40 a.m. The teller was Teresa Marzano. We'd graduated together from Austintown Fitch in 2000. She'd been a cheerleader, I'd been nobody, and now, 25 years later, she pulled up my signature card, verified the safe deposit box number, and walked me into the vault without a single question. Box 407 was on the top row. Inside was a black flash drive, about the size of a stick of gum, and a second envelope with Richmond Hollister's handwriting. The second envelope contained one final sheet of paper. Dale. By the time you're reading this, you know what Preston is. You know what your stepfather did for me, and for you. You know what I failed to do. I am not going to ask for forgiveness. I have not earned it. I am going to ask one thing. When you finish with Preston, and you will finish him, because you are Frank Kovac's son, and Frank did not raise a man who flinches. Remember that Vivian is still alive, and that my daughter Meredith has been trying to reach you for a year. Meredith was the only one of my children who had any of her mother's best qualities. Vivian ruined Preston and Garrett. She did not get her hands on Meredith. Meredith has been waiting for her brother for a very long time. The last thing I want you to know is that in 2019, when I signed the codicil, I told Frank about it. I asked him if he thought I was doing the right thing by you. I asked him if giving you a weapon was the right legacy for a father who had never given you anything else. And Frank wrote back to me. This was the last letter he ever sent me before he died, and he said, Richmond, the only right thing you can do for Dale at this point is make sure that when the fight comes, he has enough to win. Leave him the ammunition. I'll make sure he knows how to aim. Frank aimed you at me too, Dale. He would have wanted you to know that. I earned it. Take care of Meredith, take care of your mother, take care of the daughter I was never allowed to meet. Richmond. I put both letters in my jacket pocket. I put the flash drive in the other pocket. I walked out of the vault. I got back in Mike's truck. Pittsburgh. Bennett Ror's office was on the 21st floor of a building on Grant Street. Oak paneling, leather chairs, windows overlooking the river. Bennett was 78 years old. White hair, blue eyes, a slight lilt of old-school Pittsburgh accent. Louisa Trenholm was already waiting. 51 years old, navy blazer, a binder in front of her 3 inches thick. I put the flash drive on Bennett's desk. This is from Frank Kovac, my stepfather. He and my biological father were in contact for 30 years, and my father made sure there was a recording of Preston discussing my death. It's on this drive. Bennett and Louisa looked at each other. Mr. Kovac, Bennett said, I did not know about the recording. Neither did I. Frank Kovac told me about it in a letter from 2017 that I opened 2 hours ago. Louisa took the flash drive. I can authenticate this within 24 hours. If it's what you say it is, and I have no reason to doubt you, this is the United States Attorney's Office calling Preston's lawyer, not the other way around. This is federal murder conspiracy, not financial crimes. I sat down. Bennett sat down across from me. Mr. Kovac, before we go any further, I need to tell you about the codicil. Frank told me, 49% of the voting shares. I can remove Preston, I can appoint directors, I can sell the company. Yes, but it is more than that. Your father also established, through a trust separate from the codicil, a restitution fund. 300 Hollister Industrial employees have seen their pension contributions cut over the last 8 years by approximately 12%. Your father quietly set aside $2.8 million to make those pensions whole the moment you took control. The fund is already in existence. It only requires your signature to activate. He thought of everything. He thought of almost everything, Mr. Kovac. He did not think of one thing. What? Bennett looked at me. He did not think of how it would feel for you to know that your real father, Frank Kovac, spent 30 years protecting you from a family you didn't know about. That is a gift your biological father could not have given you. Richmond Hollister understood that. That was, I believe, the only thing in his life he actually got right. I did not respond for a minute. Then I said, file the codicil today, before Preston can move assets. It will be filed by 4 p.m. And the flash drive, authenticate it tonight. I want the U.S. attorney to have it by end of business tomorrow. Louisa nodded. And one more thing. Yes? Call my half-sister Meredith. Tell her I'd like to meet her this weekend in Youngstown. Tell her to bring her kids if she has them. Bennett smiled for the first time since I'd walked into his office. I'll make the call. The codicil was filed at 3:51 p.m. The flash drive was authenticated at 11:40 p.m. The United States Attorney for the Western District of Pennsylvania received it at 9:12 a.m. the following morning. Preston Hollister was arrested at his office in McKees Rocks at 4:37 p.m. on March 3, 2025. The FBI team that made the arrest was led by an agent who had spent 18 months building a separate case against Preston's security firm for unrelated activity. When the recording from 2023 came across her desk, she called her supervisor and said, "We're not doing wire fraud anymore. We're doing murder conspiracy." Preston did not make bail. The court ruled he was a flight risk and a danger to a specific individual named in the criminal complaint. The specific individual named in the criminal complaint was me. The 6-month memorial was held on the lawn behind Preston's mansion in Sewickley Heights on August 10, 2025. Preston was not present. He was in federal pretrial detention at the Allegheny County Jail, where he would remain until his guilty plea in February of 2026, 14 years federal, minimum 11. Garrett was present. He had lost his law license 6 weeks earlier, in a disciplinary hearing that made the front page of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. He was a guest in his own family's event and nobody was speaking to him. Vivienne was present. She had aged 10 years and 6 months. She was wearing the same black dress she had worn to her husband's funeral, and she was sitting alone in the front row with a glass of water in her hand and no one on either side of her. I walked onto that lawn in a charcoal suit that fit. Not borrowed. 300 guests in summer formal wear stopped talking when I arrived. Meredith was waiting for me by the fireplace in the main hall. 46 years old, our father's eyes, my eyes. She had been in Youngstown 4 times already that summer. Audrey called her Aunt Meredith. My mother had taught her how to make pierogi from scratch. She was family, in the ways that family actually counts. Dale? Meredith? Are you going to speak? I'm going to say one thing, then I'm leaving. Okay. I walked through the French doors onto the lawn. I did not go to the microphone. I walked to the center of the crowd, and I stopped, and the 300 people in summer formal wear made a circle around me without being asked, because that's what happens when the person who owns the house walks into the room. I looked at them. My name is Dale Kovac. I am Richmond Hollister's eldest son. For 43 years, my father kept my existence a secret from this family. For the last 6 years, his eldest son, Preston, spent considerable money preparing to make sure my existence stayed a secret even after my father's death. He was not successful. The silence was total. Even the string quartet had stopped. As of March 3, 2025, Preston Hollister is in federal pretrial detention on charges that include conspiracy to commit murder. The victim named in that complaint is me. My father's estate, through a codicil signed in 2019, transferred 49% of Hollister Industrial Fabrication's voting shares to me. As of this afternoon, I have appointed a man named Earl Sewickley, who most of you have never heard of, because he is a plant manager who has worked for my family since 1987, as the new chief executive officer of Hollister Industrial Fabrication. Earl's first act this morning was to restore the pension contributions Preston had been siphoning from the company's 300 employees for the last 8 years. My father set aside $2.8 million for that purpose. He set it aside for me to authorize. I authorized it this morning. I looked at Vivienne. She was not looking back. My father was not a good man. He was a trapped man who did one honorable thing in his entire life, which was to trust my stepfather, Frank Kovac, a union electrician from Youngstown, Ohio, to watch over me. Frank Kovac raised me. Frank Kovac protected me. Frank Kovac died in 2019 without ever asking for anything in return. Frank Kovac is the reason I am standing here today instead of in an unmarked grave somewhere east of Pittsburgh. My father understood that. It is why he left me the weapon that destroyed his own son. I paused. I am not going to speak at this event again. I am not going to come to this house again. I will not attend another Hollister family gathering for the rest of my life. Meredith Hollister is my sister, and I will see her in Youngstown as often as she wants to come. The rest of you I do not know and will not meet and have no interest in knowing. I turned. I walked back across the lawn. 300 guests parted in front of me the way rooms part for the person who has just become the largest shareholder in their family's company. At the French doors, I stopped and turned one more time. One last thing. My father's grave is at Homewood Cemetery. I will visit it once a year, on February 8th, the day he died. I will bring flowers. Vivienne, you can come if you want. You buried a husband. That earns you the right. Preston and Garrett will not be welcome at that grave for as long as I am alive. Their father asked me, in the last letter he wrote me, to take care of his daughter and his widow. He did not ask me to take care of his sons. That is the measure of the man he ultimately became, and the measure of the sons he ultimately raised. I walked out. I did not look back. It is now early April of 2026, a little over a year since I walked out of that law office in Pittsburgh holding an envelope. Preston pled guilty in February, 14 years federal, minimum 11. Garrett has relocated to North Carolina and is selling real estate under his wife's maiden name. Vivienne lives in Naples, Florida. I have not heard from her. I do not expect to. I sent flowers to Richmond's grave on February 8th anyway. I stood there for 10 minutes. I said the only thing I had come to say. You were a coward. But you trusted Frank. Thank you for trusting Frank. I did not bring a second bouquet for Frank. Frank is not at Homewood. Frank is at Calvary Cemetery in Youngstown, and I visit him every month. Every month I bring 2 coffees, one with cream, no sugar. I sit in the grass next to his headstone and I talk to him. I told him about Earl Sewickley throwing Preston's framed MBA diploma into the dumpster behind the McKees Rocks loading dock on Earl's first day as CEO. I told him about Meredith's kids calling me Uncle Dale. I told him about my mother teaching Meredith how to make pierogi. I told him about the day the U.S. Attorney's Office called and told me the recording had passed every authentication test. I told Frank, thank you. I will tell him thank you every month for the rest of my life. I am still the majority owner of Hollister Industrial Fabrication. I am not the CEO. Earl has that job. He is 62. He runs the plant the way my father ran it in 1978. And the 300 employees there have a pension again, and a bonus structure, and a Christmas party I paid for last year out of what used to be Preston's office budget. I am still an HVAC contractor. Mike and I still run the garage on Poland Avenue. We hired a third guy last fall, a 19-year-old named Javier, who has better hands than either of us had at his age. We work out of the same shop. The calendar from the Lordstown Steelworkers Union is still on the wall. My daughter Audrey is 13, turning 14 in a few months. She got into a summer program for gifted kids at Kent State. She calls Hollister Industrial Dad's other thing. She asked me last week if she could come to the plant someday and see what they actually make. I told her yes. She asked if they make anything cool. I told her they make the steel that holds up oil rigs in places like the North Sea. She said, so it's giant Legos. I said, yes, honey, it's giant Legos. My mother is still on Vestal Road, still 71, still wins recipe arguments. She read all of Richmond's letters to her after the memorial. When she was done, she put them back in the folder, put the folder in the attic, and said, well, he was a more interesting man than I gave him credit for. Too bad he was a coward. Pass the salt. Frank's letter I keep in a fireproof box in my bedroom closet. I read it once a year on the anniversary of the day he died. I do not need to read it more often. I know what it says. I carry it in my chest now, 3 sentences in particular. You are not a Hollister. Your name is Kovac. Now go carry it. That's what I'm doing every day, carrying the name. So let me ask you something. If you found out that the man who raised you, the one you loved, the one who taught you how to wire a house and change your oil and hold your ground, had been quietly protecting you from a family you didn't know existed for 30 years without ever saying a word about it, what would you do? Would you finish what he started? Would you honor the weight of the name he gave you by using it to end the people who had tried to take it from you? Or would you walk away and let them live, tell yourself you were bigger than the fight, and pretend that was dignity? I chose to finish it. Not because I'm a hard man, I'm not. I install central air conditioning for a living in Youngstown, Ohio. I cry at my daughter's choir concerts. I make bad jokes at my best friend's kitchen table. But when my own blood tried to make me disappear, when they tried to erase the daughter I love, and the mother who raised me alone, and the name my stepfather gave me because he had earned the right to give it, I understood that the dignity wasn't in walking away. The dignity was in making sure they understood exactly who they had picked a fight with. Tell me what you would have done in the comments. Tell me if you've ever been underestimated by your own family. Tell me if your real father wasn't the man whose name you share. Tell me who your Frank was. I'll be reading. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who has had to fight for their own name. Share it with someone whose stepfather raised them better than their father ever did. Share it with someone who knows what it means to be told they were never supposed to exist, and to prove every day of their life that they were. Subscribe to the channel for more stories. Take care of yourselves, and take care of your Franks.